Hey guys, Joe here. We're doing a tabletop review. However, it's all going to be from behind the camera because I have a massive zit in the middle of my forehead and I'm not dealing with it. How's that for honesty? For those of you new to the channel, thank you for stopping in and checking out this video. If you like this kind of video, go ahead and consider subscribing. It will help the channel grow. Also, use my affiliate link if you aren't already using somebody else's. Go to Amazon, buy some stuff, and it will again help the channel grow. The more I can grow the channel, the more opportunities I have with firearms such as this one. And this one, as you read from the title, my gerd, it's a Glurk, is a Glock 48 Slimline in black, just released. Glock released the 48 obviously last year, but this is the new black slide for the 48. Before we get going, magazine out, nothing in here, nothing in the chamber. We are safe, we can drop the slide. For those of you not familiar with Glock's Slimline lineup, it consists of the Glock 48 and the Glock 43X. These two guns kind of took the gun world by storm when they came out. Some people were like, oh great, it's just another Glock, who cares? A lot of people were saying that until they got their hands on them and they were like, oh my god, wow. And honestly, I am one of those people. The first time I picked up a Glock 48, the first thing I said was, man, that falls perfectly to hand. It fits like a 1911. Not 100% a 1911 grip, but more like a 1911 grip than any other polymer gun I've picked up pretty much ever. Largely because of how thin it is. This is a 1911. Specifically, this is a 1911 chambered in 9mm. In fact, we will at some point be doing a comparison between these two firearms. But what I wanted to show you is the grips. The Glock 48 is actually a narrower grip than the 1911. Now, Hogue grips might narrow it up a little bit, but it's still very similar in terms of width. And that made this gun easy to aim, easy to point, and honestly, probably, in my opinion, one of the best Glocks yet. Now, that's coming from somebody who, quite frankly, for a long time was not a huge fan of Glock. The first Glock I bought, and it was my own dang fault, 3 months after I started shooting, was a used Glock 27 short frame in 40 cal that had been Cerakoted, taken apart, put back together, and it shot fine. But I went from a 1911 to a short frame Glock 40. You can imagine how bad an experience that was for me because of my stupidity. Had I been smart, I would have went with the Glock 17, Glock 19, Glock 34, something else, so that I didn't sour myself on it. And for 2 years, I refused to really mess with Glocks until I picked up one of these. This one is not mine. This one's owned by the store I work for. But since the slide just got released, I wanted to do a video as soon as possible. Here's a tip for some of you guys before we get going into like the teardown. If you own a Glock 43 and you're thinking about a 43X, stop. Don't get up. Continue listening. The Glock 43, your standard Glock 43, the slide will actually fit on a Glock 48 frame. So when I have customers come in, say they have a 43, I encourage them to look at the 48 because you can take the slide off a 43 and put it on the 48's frame, because the 48 and 43X, same frame, same fire control group, same magazines, everything. And then you have the option of changing everything up that way. Now, since the release of the black slides, which just happened this week, not as big a deal, but up until now, you could only get a Glock 48 in a kind of pearlescent silver like this handle here. I'm not sure if they did that on purpose, but literally that was the color of the slide. It was the only color available unless you got like a Talo edition or a special edition that had been modified. Now that it's available in black, well, shoot. Can you mistake that as anything other than a Glock? I don't think so. The frame, they changed the angle a little bit from the 43 when they did it, and even the 17 and 19 have a slightly different frame angle. and it's supremely comfortable. Falls right to hand, and it's, you know, when you pick it up and you go to find your sight picture, it's super easy when you're not looking through a camera from an angle. For the carry crowd, the biggest thing has always been printing. And that's another tip for you guys. If you're thinking about doing concealed carry, this is less important than this, because this is what's going to print against your shirt, your jacket, your dress, whatever you may be wearing. This is going into your waistband or into your skirt or whatever you're wearing. So this can be as long as you want. And I'm going to be proving that with the gun that we have at the shop for the next video, or one of the next videos. But this isn't. However, if you wanted a 10 round Glock 43, you needed a +4 base pad, which would have brought it out to here. Or an extended Pro Mag, which I've had. You're talking out to there, and it would have been obscene, and it would have stuck out, and it would have been useless. How Glock managed that is, even though it's technically a single stack, you can see how they're offset here. This is a 1911 magazine that holds 9 rounds. This is a Glock mag that holds 10. The first thing you'll notice is that the 1911 magazine is taller, even though it holds 1 less. Second thing you'll notice is that it is narrower than the Glock magazine. That's because the Glock magazine does what's called a semi-stagger. So they kind of push down at a slight angle like that in order to give a little bit more room for the rounds to fit into this magazine. So by doing that, you have a gun that, if you have a pinky extension on a 43, isn't any longer than this, and still carries 10 rounds. Typical mag release and trigger, it feels just like every other Glock, which again is a good thing for most people, doesn't really matter to some people. You have your Glock trigger safety, which is the only external safety on Glocks other than this and your brain, so finger and brain. But yeah, unless you depress the trigger mounted safety, it won't fire. It is also single action only. It's not like some of the older ones where it was pre-cocking the striker every time you released it. Nope. This is single action, so unless the slide fully cycles or you manually cycle it, it does not go back into a fire condition. Trigger pull is, again, Glock typical. You'll hear a lot of reviewers talk about how Glock triggers aren't the greatest, and I agree they're not. It's not terrible though, but you can see once you fire it, there's no real over travel, so you don't have to worry about that. And the reset is pretty short and crisp. Right there. Very slight take up back to the break point and fires. So if you pull straight through on your shot, it doesn't feel as heavy. But if you creep the trigger, you can see there's about that much in take up. Then you hit the wall and it just sits there until you break it. Very audible and very tactile as well, so it should be easy to shoot this even if you're wearing gloves, even though the small-ish trigger guard might prevent you from being able to get your gloved hand in there. It's a problem some people have, so in the winter they tend not to carry these because you can see how little room there is even without a glove. It does have an undercut underneath the trigger, which helps get your hand up underneath the trigger guard, and the minimal beaver tail that it has is enough to, should protect even my hand. It's not too bad. I've never gotten slide bite from a Glock, so I'm not too worried about it. But again, I don't have super thick hands, is the easiest way to put it. I don't have fat hands, is the other way to put it. If you look at the M&Ps and the HKs and even some of like the Tauruses out there, this is a very minimalistic stippling job on here. I don't think my hands are going to go anywhere, but it would be nice to see a slightly more aggressive finish on it. The Magwell is a little bit enlarged compared to the magazine itself, so it's not too hard to get them in there. Again, if I wasn't off camera to the left, I'd be more lined up to be dropping them in there. Typical controls, you have your mag release, which is pretty Pretty flat in comparison to the side of the gun, but being a concealed carry gun, that's perfectly fine. Slide release, again, quite small. If it was my gun, I would probably put an extended slide release and an extended mag release. The barrel is 1 inch longer than the 43X. As such, it does have a longer slide. However, and this is the interesting thing, the spring itself is recessed. It doesn't stick out past the end of the frame. So much like a Glock 43X, it actually stops here. Not really sure the reasoning behind that. I'm thinking they just needed the extra real estate for the barrel, and they really didn't care if the slide or the recoil spring stuck out more. And I'm sure it would have required a redesign of the entire dust cover and spring system had they done that. So I haven't heard any complaints. As I said before, it's got basic Glock sights on it, so you have your U in the back and your dot in the front. They're pretty easy to pick up. These are plastic sights. They are interchangeable with night sights though, and I would highly recommend that. You can run any of the night sights that would fit on the 43, such as TrueGlow TFXs or some Tritium or Trigicons, whatever you like and whatever you prefer. My buddy has Trigicons with night sights and fiber optic in his because he loves them. And that may be the way to go. I like them too. This side, there's really nothing going on. All you have is your takedown here. It doesn't have any back straps or anything like the Gen 5 guns tend to with the 17 and the 19, but again, not really necessary. You're not looking to extend the rear end part of it because this, again, would print against your clothing. Enough rambling. Let's take this thing apart. Being a Glock, it's very simple. Take your hand, pull your slide back just a little bit, pull down on your tabs, release the slide, and pull the trigger. It's a Glock. They know what they're doing when it comes to easy disassembly. Inside, you have a very similar slide if you are at all familiar with Glocks. Metal, double nested spring, handles recoil very well. The barrel, Browning tilting action, very common, very stout, very reliable. Being a little bit longer, you probably get a little bit better velocity out of hotter loads as well. Inside the slide, finished off very nicely, no real machining marks. Inside the back here, you have your extractor and your drop safety and your striker. You release that plate, you can pull the striker out. No need to. As you can see, it just got shipped in, so it still has its grease from shipping. It's a nice piece of metal, feels really substantial, and obviously it's the most expensive part of a Glock, so I guess it should be the nicest. Reassembly is exactly the reverse. All you do is take everything, drop it back in. Make sure the spring is parallel to the rest of the slide. If it's at any weird angle, it will catch when you reassemble it. Before we put it back together, let's go ahead and take a look at the frame. If you've ever disassembled a Glock or worked on a Glock or looked over the shoulder of somebody working on a Glock, you'll see this is all very familiar. That means triggers can be changed out for crisper ones, lighter ones, smoother ones, whatever you really feel like. There's plenty of companies doing that. I do like that it has some front and rear metal rails that the slide rides on. It will increase the longevity of the frame and the firearm. There are guns out there that have all plastic frame rails, and I've seen them get hot, and I've seen pictures of them warping. So this is a safety precaution, and good for Glock for not trying to cheap out. Not going to name names, but you know who you are, companies. Otherwise, it's very typical. Trigger, mag release, everything's in its normal position. Alright, time for reassembly. So take your frame, take your slide, make sure your spring is in the up position. You will see there is a half moon cutout in where the base of the spring is supposed to go. Take your slide, line it up with your rails. Make sure your slide fits on there without too much pressure. If you have to yank it hard, you're putting it on wrong. Go ahead and cycle your slide and you should be good to go. And we are back together. So that's the Glock 48. Will I be replacing my 1911 with a Glock 48? No. Will I consider adding a Glock 48? Yes. It would have to be the right deal though. I'm going to hold out and hope one comes in used. That's just personally. I don't like to pay retail for anything. But for the money, you're getting a lot of pistol, because this costs less than this. And that's something we'll talk about when I actually do the comparison video between the 1911 and the Glock. If you're looking for a 10+1 in a slim concealed carry, I would recommend checking this one out. Obviously you have the SIG 365, however that's a much smaller pistol. That's Glock 43 sized. The Taurus G2C, which again is a double stack 12 rounder, more in the Glock 43 size. The G2S is a 7-round single stack that's similar in width, but holds 3 less rounds. The Mossberg, same problem, 43X size. So basically, this gun compares with 1911s and probably M&Ps. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave those down below. Any comments, leave those down below. Again, thank you to the new subscribers. I'm trying to grow this channel, and you guys are helping out tremendously. Check out my other videos. I have a playlist specifically for firearms, and I will link that in the cards at the end of this video. If you want to see more videos like this, consider becoming a Patreon, using my affiliate links, and even just subscribing. And, as always, I'll talk to you later.